To assess the performance of political parties, you go to assess the environment under which they operate. And suffices to say that ever since the declaration of our independence on 9th of October 1962, we have never had an environment that is conducive for the operation of political parties. You know that in the 60s, there was the abrogation of the Constitution. Of course, political parties were still young then. There was an alliance between KY and the UPC that formed the government. And from that time, it was all, chaos. Coup after coup, suspension of the Constitution during Idi Amin's days, the abolition of political parties, they never subsisted during his time. And then, the post-Idi Amin era where there was an attempt to introduce political parties. Political parties did strive in the period between 1980 and 1985. And then there was the insurgency or rebellion against the UPC government that again characterized what has happened to our political parties throughout the period of our independence. So it's not been easy for political parties. Political parties have been seen as enemies of the ruling political party. They have been suspended, not allowed to work. And even, in the most recent times, during what we would call a civilized regime of Mr. Museveni, between 1986 to and 2005, political parties were in abeyance. They were not allowed to operate beyond their headquarters when they were allowed to begin operating. And once we, formed the FDC, for example, and the other new political parties came on board, it still has been very, very difficult for us because we are restricted in terms of our operations, not allowed by a law that is being misread by the current regime to carry out our activities across the country. And, in a nutshell, within the NRM or Mr. Museveni's rule, we have been crippled almost totally. And therefore, what is the description of multi-party democracy and regular elections does not spell real democracy in which we participate in a multi-party political dispensation.
Do you still see any relevance of the?
Well, the purpose of parties, and especially those who now fall in the opposition as a result of a multi-party political party dispensation, is for them to put to check the party in power. And I think we have not failed in our role in doing this, only that the people in power are unwilling to listen to the parties in the opposition. In parliament, for example, it's a game of numbers rather than reason. In fact, our parliament is a parliament where political mob justice is practiced. And so, to answer directly your question, the relevance of political parties is there, but it would be even better if we were given political space to act, and probably, our system changes from what we have today to a system where we have proportional representation in the House.
To what extent has politics involved people's participation?
Well, I think that the political elites have been involved in, have participated in politics, but the bulk of the population is actually just, is just some group that has been used for political expedience of a few. And I think this is where the power of the people has been subverted. The power of the people has been subverted, has been subverted And therefore, when a common citizen goes to cast his vote, the vote is meaningless. It doesn't hold meaning. Because our people have been kept in ignorance, they have not been subjected to the basic civic education that is necessary. You find them thinking that that vote that is priceless has got a small cost attached to it. And so they are willing to receive 500 shillings, 1,000 shillings, maybe at the very best, 20,000 shillings to vote for that person who gives them money. And so that vote is therefore a vote of a powerless person who has already been compromised and bought to vote for a regime that is not going to serve them as citizens of the country.
Where do you see Uganda after 60 years?
I think that after 60 years, Uganda can be described as a country in intensive care. In intensive care in such a way that the dream of our forefathers who thought that by demanding and fighting for independence, we would have a better country, a country where human rights are respected, a country where the rule of law is something to talk about, a country where our economy, given to the hands of Ugandans under their control, would flourish. In fact, it is really a great shame today that Uganda, whose independence is older than a country like Singapore, the common citizen continues to wallow in poverty. Today, the GDP of Singapore, in fact, by the year 2020, was 340 billion US dollars. And they have a per capita GDP of 60,000, over 60,000 US dollars. When you compare this to Uganda, Uganda has got a per capita of about 35, almost 40 billion US dollars. That is, far, far less, lower than the per capita, the GDP of Singapore. And we have a per capita of about 800 US dollars. Now, because we failed to exercise prudence in the time of our independence, these 60 years, we have continued to lag behind the Asian tigers, for example. There is no economic independence. Instead, there are just a few people who have taken over the country, who have accumulated wealth at the expense of a few people. You know that Uganda today is highly indebted, is a HIPIC, highly indebted, poor country. And the per capita debt is about 1.8 million shillings. This is something that has been revealed by the government of Uganda. So every citizen of this country, including a baby today, owes to the world 1.8 million Uganda shillings. That is a very grim picture. It's something that really nobody should be proud about. And so, when you even look at the different sectors, education is for the privileged few. Health is for the privileged few. You can't go to a government facility today in this country and get fully fledged services. And yet a few who are privileged are able to go out of the country to get excellent services. Some of them anyway die. Most of the important people die in foreign countries seeking medical attention. And so, looking at Uganda today, the picture is grim. And that if we have got to enjoy the fruits of our independence, it is necessary for us to think outside the box. And therefore, as FDC, we have always prescribed respect for human rights, respect for the rule of law, equitable distribution of resources, the fight against endemic corruption, and this is what is causing a lot of hemorrhage in our economy. Downsizing downsizing our public sector so as to reduce the cost of public administration, and so on and so forth. The list is very long. If we were deliberate as a country, then we would begin to enjoy our independence. This begins with the political will from the people at the top who have failed to exercise democracy and have imposed themselves on the people. Mr. Museveni has been in power for almost 37 years now. Look, throughout our 60 years of independence, he has consumed more time than all the other governments put together. And yet, the governments that came before performed better. At least, when I was growing up, in the first UPC government, we found excellent facilities in health units. Today, health is, like I said, for the few privileged people who can pay for it. And so I think that the first step is for us to get rid of this non-performing government. Because what Mr. Museveni and the NRM has failed to do in 37 years, they will not be able to do even if they were given eternity, for eternity, to rule or govern this country. And I think that within the NRM, there has to be soul searching. Within the NRM, there has to be a conversation of transition. In my trade, when you find something is not working, you replace that something. In the politics of our country at the moment, it looks like that thinking is upside down. It's inside out. And I believe that the Ugandan citizens need to wake up. And unless Ugandans wake up to take back their country, we will continue to celebrate a non-existent, a non-exciting, because you celebrate when you are happy. You are not going to celebrate when people are going hungry. You are not going to celebrate independence when Karamoja, people are dropping down dead from famine, something that should actually be foreign to a country like this that has got enough water, that has got good land, that has got an expanse of land, that has got, good climate. We shouldn't be talking about people dropping down dead 60 years after we attained our independence. And so it is up to Ugandans to determine their destiny. We, as the political leaders, and specifically I will speak about FDC, will provide the leadership. We will always be available to provide the leadership to ensure that change comes to this country.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I have a question.
I think so, because as I have stated before, the change of leadership from Milton Obote to Idi Amin was violent. And I think in that case, probably Obote did not take into consideration peaceful transition. The removal of Idi Amin, Dada, after 9 years in power, was violent, helped by the Tanzanian TPDF. And that too was because the conversation about transition was not evident. When the military council took over, of course, they were handed over power. They took over from, first of all, Yusuf Lule, who was replaced by Binaisa. That transition seemed to be seamless, but it was something that, it was bloodless, but it's something that was done by a few people. And so the involvement of the citizens, the Ugandan citizens, was not evident. When Binaisa was overthrown, he was replaced by the military council. The difference between that overthrow and that of Idi Amin was that one was bloodless, but the other was full of blood. But the result was the same, that we had an institution taking over without any conversation taking place. 1980 seemed to be a case where Milton Obote was handed over power. It looked like it was a smooth transition, but there were undertones about how the election was conducted. Mr. Museveni went to Luwero, caused the death of 500,000 citizens. That was violent, and got to power using the gun. Again, because Milton Obote, who was president at the time, did not accept a conversation, dialogue, that could have led to players working together. Today we have Yoweri Museveni, 37 years, adamant, arrogant, talking carelessly to the people of Uganda. It doesn't matter to him whether there are other political players who should be talked to. When there is an attempt to dialoguing, it is something that is trashed. It's something that Mr. Museveni does not take seriously. It's something that Mr. Museveni wants to use as an opportunity to swallow political parties in the opposition, and something that we have not accepted. And so institutions like IPOD, initiatives like IPOD, are something that we have got to continue thinking very deeply about participating in. Now, the call for transition is something that is overdue. I think that Mr. Museveni needs to look at himself in the mirror. He needs to look at his NRM after he is gone, because for sure one day he is going to go. If the NRM, like it looks like this, is pegged on an individual, then that NRM is going to collapse immediately. That individual is out of the playing ground. And therefore, within the NRM, there needs to be a conversation about transition, an open one. And outside the NRM, while involving other political stakeholders, other players in the politics of the day, there needs to be a conversation. We should converse in such a manner that we have a win-win situation, but ultimately the winners should be the citizens of this country. I believe that participating in elections does not mean that we endorse the suffering, the skewness, the lack of level political grounds on account of the use of money and force. We use this as an opportunity to advance the cause of the Ugandan people. And so in the FDC, although there is still a conversation, we still believe that we will continue participating in elections. We will continue using these elections as a vehicle to deliver a message to our people, because during ordinary times, this is not possible. Today, if I called for a rally in Kampala here, it would be violently broken. It would not be allowed to take place. The authorities would be waiving the political organization and political Organization Management Act, and misreading it as a matter of fact. And so we use elections as an opportunity to organize our people. We use an election as an opportunity to embolden our people. we use elections as an opportunity to deliver a message of our struggle to the people, and we are hoping that, judging from our gains of the last almost 20 years, that there is going to be a turning point in what we do that will bring change to this country.